Welcome to another Clear Mountain conversation, another Clear Mountain interview. Today we are so happy to have the Venerable Master, Dharma Master, Reverend Heng Sure with us. I'll give a bit of a biography of the Dharma Master and then we'll jump into questions. So, Reverend Heng Sure is an American Chan Buddhist monk and senior disciple of Master Hsuan Hua, currently spending half his time serving as director of the Berkeley Buddhist Monastery and half on retreat in Queensland, Australia. After receiving his master's in Oriental languages from the University of California at Berkeley in 1976, he met his teacher, Master Hua, and took ordination soon thereafter, being given the Dharma name Heng Sure, meaning constantly real. He is perhaps best known for the peace-seeking 2.5-year, 800-mile, 3 steps, 1 bow pilgrimage he and his companion Heng Chau, Martin Verhoeven, made from South Pasadena to the city of 10,000 Buddhas in Ukiah, California, in 1977 to 79, an account of which is featured in the books With One Heart Bowing to the City of 10,000 Buddhas and Highway Dharma Letters. After serving as interpreter for Master Hua for many years, briefly acting as abbot of the City of 10,000 Buddhas and translating many sutra texts into English, in 2003, Reverend Heng Sure completed his PhD in religion from the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. At present, Reverend Heng Sure lectures around the world on various subjects, from the sutras to veganism, and also transmit the Dharma through the unique Dharma Door of banjo, guitar, and Buddhist folk music. We are so happy to have the Venerable Dharma Master with us. And yes, he's a very good friend of our greater Thai forest tradition. So thank you, Dharma Master, for agreeing to meet with us.
My pleasure, Ajahn Kovilo and Tani Sabo. Namo Fundamental Teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Fundamental Teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Fundamental Teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be able to chat with you. I think this is a great idea.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I think both of us have been admirers of you, kind of fans, monk fans of you for a long time. The first question which I wanted to ask is regarding something which as a young 20-year-old, the thing which I found most inspiring about you was the various different, what are called the Dhutanga practices, the really tough kind of extra optional practices which go over and above what the normal rules of the monks that include, not lying down, a practice which you did full-time for over 20 years, I believe, eating 25. One meal.
25.
25 years. Yeah, which is pretty much mostly even unheard of in most monastic lineages. Doing over 45 years of eating 1 meal a day, your whole life being vegan, and even 6 years of not speaking, I believe. So
right.
These are very impressive practices. And I've always been very moved by them, but I'm curious if you'd be able to say something about what role in your life these difficult practices have had, maybe in light of Zen teachings, which are, emphasize the ever-present nature of awakening. One might ask, why torture yourself if awakening is always here? Why do all these hard practices?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Venerable. Thanks for the question. We could fill the hour with the nuances of this, and I'm assuming I'm speaking to a monastic audience by and large, and I don't know how many lay people would be interested in monks chatting, but from the point of view of the world, where we want to be as comfortable as possible, and mostly life is passed pursuing pleasure and fleeing pain, the idea that you would be vigorous in that way makes no sense at all. It seems torturous. It seems like, for monks, it's all suffering all the time, which is really a portion of the Buddha's message. And in Chinese, asceticism, dutanga, dutta in Pali, right? Dutanga.
Yeah.
In Chinese, they say kuxing, bitter practices. In fact, the experience of bitter practices is actually sweet, in that what it does, there are 13, I think the lists from the Pali tradition to the Mahayana are pretty much the same. Within the Mahayana, there are several variations, which we won't, scholars can enjoy comparing the lists. But what they break down to is body, so food, clothes, and shelter are essentially what the dutangas that, as I understand them, involve. There is an extra one in my personal adopting of ascetic practices. We 100% were following the inspiration of our teacher, Master Hsuan Hua. And I had been a zeni in Kyoto after I followed language to Taiwan in 1969 in the summer with a summer program at Donghai University, Mandarin. And the group went back to the States in September, but I on my own went on to Kyoto. Before I left America, I met Gary Snyder, the poet, who was also from the Seattle, area. And Gary Snyder said, "Oh, you're going to Kyoto." He said, "Look up Irmgard Schlegel, and she'll tell you what's happening in Zen in Kyoto at the moment, whether there's any temple that will let round-eye foreigners, gaijin, in to live there." So I did, and Irmgard said, "Okay, you got to go to Antaiji." She said, "That's where Uchiyama Roshi is teaching, and Uchiyama Roshi will take you in, but you got to be sincere." So that was my first experience with Buddhism. But when I came back to the U.S., I was enrolled in Oriental languages at UC Berkeley and met Master Hua, because my former college roommate in my undergraduate years had now become Bhikshu Hung Yo, had come to San Francisco and met Master Hua and shaved his head and put on a robe and ordained. So that was how I wound up at Gold Mountain Monastery in 1973. So everything that I knew about being a Mahayana Bhikshu was in Master Hua, in the actual life as it was lived. Uchiyama Roshi was a Zen master and a wonderful teacher, a kind-hearted man, and a person with some accomplishment, but he was also married. And his wife was a bhikshuni, who and they were exemplars of a modest and virtuous life. There was no sense of anything being improper, but it was not a celibate monastic practice. And the idea of Vinaya Dhamma Vinaya, wasn't there in the Soto Zen world. So anyway, so when I found Master Hua's tradition, ascetic practices were what he did. And the story behind eating one meal a day is a personal story of Master Hua's, which was that he came from a corner of Manchuria, from northeast China, where the invading Japanese armies had set up a testing facility that everybody now historically looks back and says the Japanese doctor was the equivalent of Mengele, making lampshades of human skin and all this kind of, experiments on babies and starvation and just demonic evil stuff was happening in Master Hua's hometown. He was a teenager and a patriotic, red-blooded Chinese, strong, strapping, tall man, but couldn't find his way to go to war. And so what he noticed, what he saw, he observed in his hometown was that his his older brothers, his neighbors had been impressed into work gangs. They'd been just basically forced into corvée labor. And Manchuria is a place of weather extremes, very hot in the summer, freezing cold in the winter. And these workers were starving and freezing. They were given not enough food to eat, and they were given basically a straw mat to wrap up in at night. So Master Hua said, although I can't defend my family, my larger family here, he said, what I can do is reduce my consumption of food and clothing. So he made a vow when he was a teenager to he could eat 3 bowls of food per meal 3 times a day. He said, I want to reduce that to 3 bowls of food once a day and see if I can't sustain. And although I'm not able to directly give the leftover 6 bowls of food to my starving compatriots, at least I didn't consume it. So indirectly, I'm making this offering. And sure enough, he was able to hang on, eating 1 meal a day. And he had read already, we have a Mahayana sutra called the Sutra in 42 sections, where it says the Buddha ate 1 meal a day at noon. So he said, I'll comply with the Buddha's practice and indirectly preserve 6 bowls of food. Likewise, he said, if I can make do with 3 layers of cloth to cover my body, then the fabric that I don't consume will still be available in theory, in the spirit of donating to my starving, freezing compatriots. And so he made a vow to wear 3 layers of cotton cloths, winter and summer. And so that was the crucible out of which came his personal vows, which then became, when he ordained, so this is Dhutanga practice. I'm already doing it. So we saw, and so Master Hua was very tuned in to America in the 60s and 70s and said, there's lots of food being wasted here. He said, I grew up, when I ate the potato skins along with the potatoes. I didn't peel the skins off the potatoes. I ate the apple core along with the apple. I didn't throw away the apple core because there wasn't anything else. He said, I know starvation, and you are wasting food here as a nation. That's not good for your blessings. He said, you're going to exhaust your blessings by wasting food that you could eat. You're just throwing it away. That's not right. You're harming yourself without even knowing it. So he said, I'm going to encourage you to we're not going to spend money on food. So I was raised as a dumpster diver in my early years as a bhikkhu, as a bhikshu. We went to the Safeway in San Francisco, where you still could at the time. And I lived for 3 years that I was at Gold Mountain on day-old bread and slightly bruised vegetables and fruit. And so we would come home from Safeway with just armloads of perfectly good thrown out vegetables that weren't sellable, So this was the attitude. And to say it's, torturing, the idea, your question where you say, you're quoting someone who would say, gee whiz, the Buddha nature is everywhere, why torture yourself? Well, you could say the same thing. The ground grows all the crops that every human and animal eats. Why bother farming? It all comes out of the ground, so it's just, we know it's there. Why bother? Why work so hard? Well, the answer is you have to actually plant the crops and grow them with the skill of a farmer. Although the Buddha nature is there, you have to uncover it. You have to cultivate it to realize it. Because we also, along with that ever-present Buddha nature, we have a full measure of greed and anger and delusion and pride and doubt, the 5 fundamental afflictions. So it's just like saying all of the gold in the world is under the ground. It's all mine, I own all that gold, don't you know? So, well, show me. Well, it's still on the ground, but So yeah, it's you have to actually cultivate it before you realize it. So do you need to go to extremes? I'm not convinced. For example, after 25 years of sleeping, sitting up, Master Hua one day came to me and said, well, John, he said, how come you're teaching all of my disciples how to sleep sitting up? Wrong. Look at your posture. You're doing it wrong. Why did you do it that way? I'm like, sure. He said, yeah, how come? But Sherpa, what? So I don't know the answer to that, Sherpa. I did it wrong. I wound up with a bent posture because my way of doing it, I slept at night in half lotus. I crossed one leg and slept like this. The right way to do it is illustrated by a monk whose name was Haideng. Master Haideng was the abbot of Shaolin Monastery. He was the all China martial arts champion for 50 competitions. He was about 5'2" and was the one who could do a one finger stand. That's never been duplicated. We actually saw him do a one finger stand, not a one hand stand, a one finger stand. Master Haideng. He did sleeping sitting up correctly. And the way he did it was in half lotus and just that, sleeping. I had to lean. I couldn't. I lasted this way about an hour, and then I hit the floor. So I did my Dhutanga sleeping, sleeping up wrong. During the pilgrimage, it was helpful while Bhikshu Heng Chau, Marty Verhoeven, and I, while we traveled 800 miles, we had a 1957 Plymouth station wagon, which was our traveling Bodhimanda. That was our monastery on wheels. And we took out the back seat, and Marty sat in the wheel well at night, and I sat on the back deck. But in order to sit at night, I had to do that because the roof required me to do that. So I was touching the roof. So we slept sitting up in the Plymouth at night. That gave us a shelter from the elements. Mind you, it was illegal, so it's not recommended. I don't encourage anybody to try to sleep on Highway 1, the Pacific Coast Highway at night. The police will happily move you off the, So back to your question on Dhutanga practices. The Dhutanga, the Sanskrit word, simply means to shake up. The Chinese translation is doso, which means to invigorate. And what's the purpose of that? It's not to torture yourself. That is a practice that doesn't lead to the Tao. You're creating affliction instead of transforming affliction. The purpose of it is to allow you to come face to face with the limits of your life and your consciousness. It is very easy, even in a monastery where lay people would say, oh my goodness, how can you possibly stand this deprivation? How can you all renounce so much? And not understanding the joy and the liberation that comes from having enough and no more. When you have an ascetic practice focused on clothes, food, and sleep, you're always taking it to that edge where you feel the most alive. Mm-hmm. And it's not bitter, it's not torture, it's more a sense of how liberating to realize that one meal a day that of plant-based, harmless food, ahimsa, just puts me so much closer to my awareness of my total interdependence on the earth, air, fire, and water of the planet and all beings' bodies, and gratitude. Gratitude that the universe supports me, that I'm here to be able to breathe and to experience that edge. Once you lose the edge, even in a monastery, you can get very comfortable to where you're just kind of dreaming from meal to meal. That they say, born drunk and dying in a dream, just thinking this is life, life is good. And if you can fill your stomach 80% and fill the other 20% with gratitude and say, how wonderful to be able to cultivate the way one more day, you understand Dhutanga practices. That's the point. One more footnote here. I added to it we take the Shramanera, the 10 Shami precepts, the Shramanera precepts, before we take our Bhikshu precepts. So there's one, the precept against holding gold, silver, or valuable objects, which Theravada bhikkhus are very familiar with. And in fact, they do a more thorough job than Mahayana monks on holding it. But Master Hua turned that into an extra dhutanga. So he said, it is best if you can live without touching money. So for 25 years, I did not touch money. And it's not a strict dhutanga, it's a precept. And I was a lot closer to Theravada bhikkhu's practice of never touching valuables. Once I became director or manager of the monastery, I had to amend that practice to be able to pay the bills. We don't have that pure person practice. So eating once a day, sleeping sitting up. Now I lie down to sleep, and I still eat one meal a day. But that's now if I were to eat more, it would feel. What's nice about eating once a day at noon is that night and the next morning when you meditate, you feel very focused because the body is not running through the various processes of digestion. So your energy is very present. But so anyway, long answer to a first question.
Oh, thank you, Reverend. And I'm curious about, there seems to be two flavors of dhutanga you're speaking about. There's one that might be classified as the sila of simplicity, or the ethic of simplicity. With one meal a day, it's enough. Wearing 3 layers of cloth, I believe that recollection is exactly almost as found in the suttas around this is enough. I don't think many people would say walking 800 miles, bowing every 3 steps, and sleeping upright in the back of a van is, the usual road to simplicity. So that feels like on a whole different level of a level of faith and practice, which is somewhat unique, actually, and distinct from these other recollections which you've been sharing. And I find sometimes the benefit of such things can be best exemplified in sort of, as opposed to sort of a general reflection, sort of a specific moment where something really emerged as an insight or a distinct memory. And I'm curious, on that walking pilgrimage, right, with that level of kind of faith and devotion, were there any moments that stand out in terms of you really seeing first of all, the deepest challenge and darkest part of that practice? Because surely, and I know I might, it would be extremely difficult for me to do something like that, but also another moment or two where you saw what came of it that was distinct and that you will remember in your life. Do you have 2 specific stories around that, or if not that, then just a general reflection?
Yeah, no, I appreciate your question, and you ask it in a nuanced way that gives me lots of choices. That's nice. I want to step away from being special among bhikshus, because, for example, when Theravada bhikkhus do a tudong, I think the spirit is the same. The idea is you don't know with that first step what you're going to meet. Will lunch come to you today? Are you going to get cursed? Are you going to get celebrated? Are you going to have a wet place to sleep tonight or a dry place to sleep? You don't know. You don't know. And where is your mind going to travel as you go out and walk with your, you got your bowl just right, and you've got your necessities, and you've got your Dharma protector with you. Nick Scott protecting Ajahn Sucitto in India, he didn't know what he was going to meet. So I don't think it's different in spirit. of course, the conditions, individual conditions are different. And if I were to say, do I really understand why I found myself silently bowing to the highway on the edge of America, reciting the name of the Flower Garland Sutra, I don't know. I have no idea why that happened. And to compound the I don't know, I think I've done it before. I have some evidence that this is not the first time I've done that. And my companion, Bhikshu Heng Chau, Master Hua, when I told Master Hua what I wanted to do, that I had this inspiration, he said, well, you can't go alone. And I said, well, who can go with me, Shifu? And he said, he's not here yet. And it's like, what, Shifu? Never mind too much false thinking, just bow, you know. So there was a lot of what? How's that again? In and I among fellow cultivators, among our bhikshus, our greater bhikshu sangha, Theravada Mahayana together, I humbly tell stories that have spiritual or mysterious or esoteric aspects to them, because those are very individual, and you can harm somebody's bodhi resolve by making them want to have some sort of mystical experience, you know. So I'm really cautious about doing that. But when it comes to the actual, you know, inner story of what happened to me, I have to just say what happened, and I'll share that with you all, just among us, among, you know, whoever in robes watches this broadcast. So
and Ajahn, this may go out to others who aren't in robes as well at some point, but we can cut out any parts that you see
right.
fit too. Yes,
Right.
sorry.
So when I finished my master's degree and followed my former undergraduate roommate, David Bernstein, who is now Bhikshu Hangyo at Gold Mountain, followed him over. And I was still a layperson. I was working as an electrician's apprentice to pay back my student loans before I left home. I still had debts to pay. So I was working with the intention of becoming a monk. And I had moved into the monastery, but I was living as a layman. And so I said to Hangyo, I said, well, now I can actually really commit to a practice. What should I start? What should I practice? Among the 84,000 Dharma practices, which one is ideal? And he said, okay, why don't you bow to a sutra? And I said, what does that mean? And he said, here. And so he took a copy of the Chinese Avatamsaka Sutra, Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing, and he opened it. He said, all right, start here. And he makes a full prostration. Thus, I have heard, you know. And he bows down the line. This is printed vertically, the Chinese characters, Ru Shi Wo Wen, thus I have heard, thus have I heard. And he bowed to every character on a page, and I'm like, that's too slow. That's just too slow. That's ridiculous. I said, I'm a master's of arts, you know, University of California. I speed read 3 books at a time. I keep my books with the spines open, stacked up, so I can just, you know. And he said, yeah, right. And what single sentence from any of those books do you recall? I was like, well, I can summarize them. He said, no, you don't know. You didn't retain any of them. He said, bow to this line of characters and tell me what it was. So I bowed. He closed it, and I could recite it. He said, see? Well, maybe I'll try it, you know. So I started bowing to the sutra. Sure enough, for people, you know, graduate students, we tend to be so head heavy, so word bound, that slowing down and bowing to one word in the sutra per bow. And there's another piece of it, which is you contemplate briefly each Chinese character in your dantian, in your hara, your solar plexus. Just visualize it and let it go. So sure enough, it became my favorite practice. It slowed me down. And so I started bowing to the sutra. And we did our morning chanting and morning sitting. And then it was personal practice time. And so I would go up to the second floor of Gold Mountain Monastery, which is right in the Mission District on 15th and Valencia. I don't know if anybody knows San Francisco, but it's the oldest neighborhood. It's actually the barrio, it's a Hispanic ghetto. Now it's been yuppified, completely gentrified. So there I was, early in the morning, sun rising out the window to the east over the East Bay Hills. And I could hear seagulls. And I would light a stick of incense and start bowing. And I would usually bow for an hour, usually 2 pages of the sutra per day. And so I kept it up for about 6 months. And then one morning, lit the incense, opened the window, felt the breeze come in, heard the birds, and started to bow. And as I bowed, I realized that I was smelling salt air. And the Mission District is not, all of San Francisco is close, surrounded by water on both sides, but it's not close in the Mission. How come I was smelling salt air and feeling a breeze on the left side of my face? And as I bowed, I realized I was bowing on blacktop. And there was someone standing behind me who was also bowing. And I was bowing to the sutra outdoors. And I kept on bowing. And I could feel the breeze. I could hear surf. I could hear the tide coming in and heard the seagulls much louder. And suddenly I went, what is this? Why I'm not, and there I was back on the second floor of Gold Mountain Monastery. And for who knows how long, I had been bowing outside, heading north because the ocean was to the left and there was somebody behind me. And so a friend behind me. And so that day I had my opportunity we took turns taking Master Hua his lunch tray up on the third floor of Gold Mountain. It was my turn. So I took the lunch tray up and said, Shifu, I had a strange experience today while bowing. Oh, what was it? And I told him the story. And he got this, 100-foot stare in the 10-foot room, kind of looking out. And he said, oh, so it's that time again, huh? And I said, Shifu? He said, too much false thinking. Just be more sincere. Go bow, So I was like, So that was the first time that I knew there was more to what was going on than I knew. And so then I asked him later if I could, because in our tradition, we have this 3 steps, 1 bow practice, which was exemplified by my grand teacher, Master Empty Cloud, Master Hsuan, his name was, lived to be 120. Probably the most renowned Chan monk in a couple centuries, Empty Cloud. And he did a 3 steps, 1 bow pilgrimage from Putoshan on the East China Sea all the way across to Wutaishan, so 3,000 Chinese miles, to repay his mother's kindness for giving him birth. She died in his birth, giving birth to him. So that was his motive for bowing. So I'd heard of this. And I have to say, we had already had 2 bhikshus from Gold Mountain do a 3 steps, 1 bow pilgrimage. Bhikshu Heng Ju and Heng Yo, my former roommate, took off from Gold Mountain and bowed to Seattle and then on to Marble Mount, Washington. It took them 9 months. He went very fast. And so I had already known of this practice. And we had a brand new monastery in Los Angeles, our first branch called Gold Wheel. So I asked Master Hua Shifu, I said, I really, really want to bow to the sutra. The Abhitamsaka Sutra has drawn me into the door of the monastery, kind of like an iron filing to a magnet. Could I bow to the sutra from our new monastery? And he said, city of 10,000 Buddhas is about to be realized. 1976 was when we acquired it. He said, it's going to take a lot of sacrifice to make that monastery real, to realize it. It's going to take a lot of strength. Do you think you have enough strength to land that monastery? You know, do you have enough blessings? Can you generate blessings? And I said, absolutely not. He said, yeah, that's correct. You don't. But where do blessings come from? They come from cultivation. So if you want to do that, but you can't go now because he's not here yet. And I said, who, Shifu? He said, never mind. Too much false thinking. Just go bow and be sincere. That was his answer. So every time. So from the time I first mentioned it to him till when the pilgrimage began was about 6 months. And one person came and heard about my plan, my vow to do that. And he said he wanted to go. And Master Hua said, wait. And this monastic turned out to be not the right one. And he came and left. Then Marty Verhoeven, Heng Chau, showed up. And the day he came in the monastery, the phone rang. And it's unusual. Here's a young guy who came in and he had a Pendleton shirt, just exactly like a Pendleton shirt that I was wearing, that I had worn when I was a layman. And he had a mustache, the same color as a mustache that I had worn as an official hippie back in the 60s. He was driving a pickup truck, similar to a pickup truck that I had driven. He was a guitar player and I had played guitar as a layman. And so here was a guy who, you know, was kind of living the same lifestyle that I had lived. The phone rang and Shifu said, Guojan, Shifu, has anybody come? Yes, actually, Shifu, there's a new young man here. Shifu says, tell him to come to lecture tonight. Okay, you want to come to the lecture tonight? Oh, what's the lecture? He says, okay, Shifu. You know. So that night, Master Hua called us out and said, Guojan, what are you waiting for? Why aren't you going to make your stupid vow in front of everyone? Okay, sure. You told me not do it now. So I made my vow. And so Marty Verhoeven, who had come in the door that day, said, this is really strange. He said, I think I'm supposed to go with him. He said, is that possible? After I made my vow to bow from Gold Wheel Monastery to the city of 10,000 Buddhas that barely existed at that point. So that's how it started. So long answer to your question again, but it seems like some things are arising from the eighth consciousness when the time is right. I don't know. A bit mysterious. So
yeah. Thank you so much, Dharma Master. Yeah, amazing stories. And for anyone who hasn't yet read his journals, there, he and Reverend Heng Chau. I mean, amazing stories. I'm curious. You just mentioned like the vow that you made, and that's in the Mahayana class that I'm in right now, where we've just started the longer Sukhavati, the Pure Land, the longer Pure Land Sutra, and reading about Dharmacharya's his vows that he made, and it's impressive. It's a whole nother layer way of making vows. You know, most Americans were used to, like, I'm going to vow not to eat chocolate for, a week, and he's like, I'm going to vow to make a whole universe, basically. But I'm curious if you could speak more about vows, because obviously that's been something which has really powered and charged your whole monastic life, maybe your whole life. I remember one vow which I was especially impressed by, if I'm remembering correctly, that you have vowed and aspire to, not only for the rest of this life, but for all future lives until you attain awakening, to be a monastic, to be celibate. I'm curious if you could speak about vows in general, or just the vow to stay in robes and to be a monk for.
So vows are, so one of the joys of my life as a monk is finding brotherhood with the Taifora Sangha. from my earliest. Well, I'll tell the story, and then I'll get to your question specifically. But I want to give a context for it. 3 steps, 1 bow had finished. It was now 1980. We arrived at City of 10,000 Buddhas in 1979. And it was time for the winter Chan retreat. We did 21 days in the winter of 12 hours of sitting a day, sitting and walking, sitting and walking. We do an hour of sitting and 20 minutes of walking, and an hour of sitting. And we were in day number 6 or 7, and everybody was really, in that kind of sleeping samadhi, half awake, half asleep, and fuzzy head. And the door opened, and in came Master Hua and a tall American bhikkhu in robes exactly like yours, Ajahn Sumedho. And the two of them walked around, and it was very much the sense that Master Hua was proudly showing, saying, yeah, we do this. They'll be here for another couple of weeks. And so we're not supposed to be looking, we're supposed to be sitting there. But here's this, wow, here's this very tall bhikkhu. Who's this? And so Robert Jackman, as a Californian, is Ajahn Sumedho. So after the session was over, Shifu said, you can take him as your role model in cultivation. He has been through a drought in India. He's been through a famine. He's made strong vows. He and I have been fellow cultivators in past lives, he said. The Chinese word is Tong Can Dao You. It's fellow Chan monks, friends along the Dao, friends along the path. So, and you think, well, that's interesting. How does Master Hua know that? So you just assume that he knows things like that. So if you look at Ajahn Sumedho's life, he had plans to go to China for college, but was prevented. Yeah. So ask him about his connection with Chinese culture and Chinese language, that because of the fall of the bamboo curtain, he wasn't able to go to Shanghai to study. So anyway, interesting story. So how do interesting. So, all right. As I say, one of the joys of my life as a monk is the connection with and the ability to learn from the resolve and from the vigor and the purity of the Theravada tradition, and the uniformity of the Sangha order, and how the vows of simplicity. I mean, you could say precepts are vows. So every time you do the Patimokkha, those are vows. Yo panabhikkhu, right? What's the difference? What is a vow? A vow is a thought that arises from the mind that says, I will do this. And interestingly, this is funny, synchronicity. I'm explaining every week the Flower Garland Sutra. I'm aware, right? I have a glass sliding door right beside me, and there is a brush-tailed possum right outside eating the leftover bird seed. So I'm hearing the noise of my possum. There's a mother with the baby on her back. So I don't know if my microphone is picking up the random noises, but it's a possum outside. So anyhow, as I lecture on the Avatamsaka Sutra every week, I'm at the chapter called the Dasha Bhumi, the 10 stages chapter, known as the 10 grounds or the 10 stages. It describes the Bodhisattva path. And so instead of, I understand that in the Theravada tradition, the Bodhisattva is not emphasized. The Arhat, the Shravaka, is emphasized. That's okay. These are complementary stories. So I'm not going to try to, I'm going to speak as I would to brothers, and just, understand that we haven't learned all the stories yet. I'm investigating the Pali Suttas with vigor, and I would love to share the Mahayana Sutras vigorously. So I'll just, I'll apologize once and then pull it off the table and say, let's study each other's stories. All right. So the place where I am currently, in fact, last Sunday, 3 days ago, I was explaining vows in the first stage out of 10. The bodhisattva on the first stage, called the stage of happiness, makes vows. And I looked in a commentary from the Tang Dynasty. It's called the Avatamsika Commentary and Subcommentary by a monk called Chengguan. National Master Clear and Cool was the name the emperor gave him, Qingliang Guoshi. And I researched what is a vow, because there's a giant section of text about vows. And what I've learned fresh after 46 years of dealing with this, I saw it for the first time just in my research for this week, was Master Chengguan from the Tang Dynasty, 1300 years ago, saying the point about the vow is the bodhisattva is actually seeking something that he doesn't have yet. It is a wish he or she is seeking. They are putting their feet on the path because this is the direction they're going. So a vow is like a compass heading. Okay, we're heading southwest. We're heading due east, and we're not there yet. So the bodhisattva is the goal that he seeks to, that there are 10 in the list, and he vows to always turn the wheel of Dharma. That's one. And then it goes into details. That's one of the vows. He vows to always teach living beings. And the living beings are listed. There's all, born from wombs, born from eggs, born, that the list. So another vow, he vows to always explore and master the bodhisattva's practices as they are. So in other words, he's going to become a great meditator. He's going to become a great precept holder. He's going to become a great giver, a donor. The first of the 10, he vows to always practice giving. So he's going to be a master donor to the Buddha, to his teachers, to living beings, So these are the vows. And what's going on in the sutra, and this is maybe more of a detailed answer than you were looking for, but the idea is the 10 stages chapter is the entirety of the bodhisattva's path from first step to success. And in the first stage, this is the foundation. So the foundation is where he says, okay, north. We're going north. We're going south. This is where we're going. And the path is to be walked. So the vow is what he has not yet realized, but seeks to realize. And that was like, And we have, Master Hua has a list of what are called the 6 guidelines of the city of 10,000 Buddhas. And number 3 is no seeking. So, oops, wait, no seeking. But a vow is about seeking what you have not realized. And what's the difference? So my understanding of the difference is the no seeking ties into a sense of the 7-year itch, discontent. I've heard that, we're kind of long hours here in the monastery, and I think I'd like to actually check out Facebook. Let me get a Facebook account because I'm told that there's, so that kind of seeking, the wish to fulfill desire, sparked by desire, self-seeking. That's that 不求. And the reason I understand Master Hua's 3rd guideline of no seeking is the antidote is contentment. Contentment says, yeah, I've got exactly what my karma has brought me. I've got exactly what I've earned through my bank account of blessings and offenses that power me karmically, you know. And if I want something different, go out and earn it, go out and cultivate, go out and do the work to get. So that's contentment. The Bodhisattva's vows arise from a place of selflessness, of I need to learn how to give so I can teach. I need to turn the Dharma wheel, so I have to study. I need to protect these Bodhisattva's practices, so I'm going to dig into them, you know. That's a difference. So it's self-indulgent or self-transcending. That's the difference. So that's what vows are. Amitabha's vows, what a dreamer. So Dhammacharya, you said Fazang, was this mythical character who said, I am not content in a world that is zero sum, where if I take a piece of the pie, you don't get it. You know, a world of duality. I'm not content. I'm going to build a world without duality. I'm going to build a world where suffering is over. And then he goes out from that vow. Anyone who recites my name can come with me, can be there, and we will together create this world without dukkha, you know. And so when I heard that, I have to say, I am not an adherent of the Pure Land. I respond to Guanyin Bodhisattva, has always been my kind of lone star, my pole star, is the compassion of Guanyin Bodhisattva, who is connected to the Pure Land, but I am not one who recites the name of Amitabha all day long. And yet at the Berkeley Monastery, we have Jinfo, our elder Taiwanese monk, who it just never stops reciting. And he is totally devoted to teaching Amitabha in the Pure Land. So it's what I understand how, you know, so I think it's great that Venerable Kovilo, you're, you know, picking up the larger Sakavati Vyuha and just learning about it, and just saying this story is here in Buddhism too. The way I understand it is, there are yogas, right? There is Raja Yoga, which has to do with meditation. There's Bhakti Yoga, which is devotion. There is Karma Yoga, which is service. You know, there is Hatha Yoga, which is, you know, exercise and strength. And so some people respond to a devotional message. And that's where the Pure Land comes in. Others are completely do-it-yourselfers. That's the Chan path. Other people want to master the Vinaya, to purify the body and mind and mouth, you know. So it is a path. And that particular story, the way we tell it in the Mahayana is, among the 12 divisions of the Tripitaka, there is one division that's called spoken without request. All the other sutras came after someone asked. They said, you know, they did the Pali request to the Buddha, and or whatever language was current, and the Buddha spoke to resolve their problems, to answer their questions, to bring blessings, etc. You know, at one point, according to the Mahayana tradition, the Buddha said, "No, I have a story that you all don't know. Sit down, get out your notebooks, you know, turn on your digital recorder, because I'm going to tell you about the vows of Amitabha." So that was spoken without request, the only time. So that's the way our tradition tells it.
Reverend, thank you so much for this. And I know that it's getting late there, possums and all, but we do have one more question, if we may.
Only one. You had that long list. We'll have to do this again. I'm sorry. I answered too long. I was hoping to get through the whole list. I
don't think you answered too long. It's been great to actually have each one delved into and hear all the stories. So it's been lovely. And I actually hadn't written this question down, but after listening to you, it's what's coming up for me is we exist in the shadows of these masters. You know, you spoke of the lineage you come from, which at least in the last 200 years begins with Shu Yun, who lived until he was 120. I believe he lived on river water and pine needles for 2 years.
Pretty much.
Burned his, what?
Pretty much, yeah. And
Yeah,
burned the finger off. Yeah.
burnt his finger off for his mother. Was survived 3 beatings by Maoist thugs when he was about 100 years old, and
He died. He died and came back, they say. That's, you know.
so there's that.
Back to a broken body, you know. So yeah, bad.
And
Yeah.
then his disciple and basically revived Chinese Buddhism, and then his disciple Master Hua, who was your teacher, you know, these astounding stories of living by his parents' grave for 2 years, was it, in a grass hut? 3 years in a grass hut as a act of filial devotion. We exist in the shadow of Ajahn Mun, Ajahn Chah, and we all exist in the shadow of the Buddha. So it strikes me that spiritual strengths might manifest differently in a modern person than they did in those previous generations. We tend to think more, perhaps be less located exactly in our hearts. But even with that being acknowledged, I'm just curious, how do we carry on and honor and embody that? How do we exist in that shadow or rise to, I mean, not that, you know, one would ever presume to rise to any level like that, but how do we, you know, are these subsequent years fated to be us, you know, subsequent generations really just, you know, echoing these songs which you've heard, you know, metaphorically years before? How do we exist with that dynamic?
Right. So that's a really good question. And I have two thoughts. One is, Master Hua at one point said to me, you're never going to be Chinese. He said, don't even try to imitate my old Chinese ways. They simply won't work here in this country at this time. You have to use every skill you have to interpret the Buddha's teaching for your culture, for your time. Then he added a sentence. He said, you know, a monk who could play a guitar in this culture would really be helpful, he said. And I said, no, Shifu, I'm totally attached. I have to sell my guitar. And Master Hua said, stupid, he said. So anyway, that's another story. So the bigger response, that's a personal issue. So about music and the Dharma. Anybody who has ever gone forth from the householder's life, at some point had a realization. Doesn't matter whether it's Prince Siddhartha, whether it's Ajahn Mun, you know, whether it's monks to come after us. I think that the place where that happens is the mind, and the realization that there is more than simply pursuing pleasure, running from pain, a life of consuming. There's more. That realization, I think, is the same, male or female, ancient, modern, into the future. So I have no worries that people to come that men and women in the future will no longer have that identical moment of awareness. If you'll allow me, in the Mahayana jargon, we're doing one of the things that we're doing at the Berkeley Monastery in particular. We're calling it decoding the Dharma. The Chinese have a genius for capturing essences into those Chinese characters. And a lot of the Dharma comes down in 4-character phrases that are just little adamantine crystals of wisdom, but they're kind of like tea leaves that you bounce them into the teacup. If you put cold water on them, there's no flavor. You have to actually decode them. You have to have hot water before you get a beverage out of them. So the hot water is actual practice of those. We're decoding the Dharma through practice. So one of those jargon phrases that I heard was called the Bodhi resolve, the Bodhi Chitta. In Chinese, it's called Putishin. And the jargon, the 4-character phrase was Shang Cheng Fo Dao Xia Hua Zhong Sheng. It said, above accomplishing Buddhahood, below teaching living beings. And so undecoded, the tea leaves and cold water is the Buddha's up there and I want to get there, and living beings are down below and we have to teach them. And it took me a long time to realize that it wasn't spatial, it was temporal. It was ultimately, I can realize my potential for wisdom. And immediately I do so by coming to grips with my own habits and faults, the things that cover over my Buddha nature. So all of the men and women from past until present and on into the future who aspire to step out of the shadows of the greats and to walk their same path do so at one point by saying, what is my potential? What am I capable of? PhD, 2 PhDs, great wealth, 12 children, all good. You know, that's not to diminish that in the least, but there's more. And the Dharma, the Vinaya Dhamma, gives us the direction. And what I love, I've taught years and years and years of Buddhist Christian dialogue at the university and the seminary and undergraduate classes, graduate classes. And one of the things that makes the most sense to people when I explain what is different about Buddhism is the direction of the search. Once you catch that insight that I, like all Buddhas of the past, present, and future, have that nature intact, no, nothing less, nothing more. I have that potential inside for wisdom and compassion. Then the Dharma says, it's not out there. It is not a theistic search. We're not looking for God on high or Gaia even. We're looking within. You turn the search around. That's unique, I think, among religions. So we go there, but once we get there, we realize, wow, I meditate and my mind is just on fire and I can't sit still. You say, yep, so start. That's what the practices are. And the vows keep you going. The vows are the direction and the promise, the strength of that thought. I will continue until I find the real gold. And I'm going to dig in the mind ground. I'm going to plant the mind ground with wholesome seeds of wisdom and compassion, nurture it with the water of blessings, and harvest the fruit of awakening on behalf of all the people who've been kind to me and who I would love to repay with some insight and some humor. So that's I think how I'm not afraid that somehow, you know, we're only walking around in a museum of the past greats. You know, I think we go out, leave the museum and take our Dharma out onto the steps of the museum and you know, tell the stories out there.
Dharma Master, can we sneak in 1 or 2 more questions, or?
Oh, me and my possum are got nothing to do but chat. No, I appreciate your, you know, the opportunity to share, and it's nice to get to know both of you as well.
Yeah, but yeah, thank you so much. These are wonderful reflections to think on. So definitely, you know, a huge part of the monastic life is just sitting with ourselves, as you say. One kind of emergent, I mean, it's been emerging for the whole time I've been in robes, but one really important auxiliary or like supporting condition, basically like one enjoyable part of being a monk has been language study. So this actual literal, you know, decoding of the Dharma, whether it's Thai, I mean, Nisibo and I have both, you know, lived in Thailand, studied Thai, studied Pali, starting to study Sanskrit. And I'm curious if you would be able to say or speak on your experience of the Dharma door of translation. I mean, you're totally fluent in Chinese and have translated many different discourses, and how that is an integral part of your monastic life, or what role does it serve? Is it a hobby? Is it a side thing? Like if one can't meditate, you know, 24 hours a day, then, you know, we've got to have some kind of, you know, thing on the side? Or is it really one and the same with this formal sitting practice?
How much time should I devote to this answer? Is this a 5-minute answer or a 10-minute answer? Or,
you know, really, we can go as long as you want. Tanisimo and I also have time. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. It's what, 3 a.m. where you are? My goodness. So in fact, language was the door that led me to the Dharma. People say, how did you go from becoming a Methodist mid-American kid in Toledo, Ohio, to a Buddhist monk? And the answer was Chinese language. And again, I have to say, it's a little bit mysterious. I think I must have been Chinese in a past life. I don't know that, I don't see it, but I have some evidence that that is the case, because I grew up completely immersed in baseball, television, girlfriends, and you know, I was a four-sport athlete. I was a jock, and I had no connection to Asia whatsoever, except my auntie, my mother's older sister, Aunt Fran, who worked in Washington, D.C. in the USIA, United States Information Agency, which gave birth to Voice of America, among other things. You know, that was a government-funded agency that she was a journalist and produced articles. Whenever there was anything happening in Washington, D.C. around Asian culture, that was her beat. She would go and report on it. And she sent me a catalog from a Chinese painter's exhibit that was at the Freer Gallery or somewhere. And I opened it up and I looked at these landscapes, and there was Chinese characters on the side. And as I looked at them, I think I was 13 years old, something went click. And I turned it sideways, and I turned it upside down, and I knew there was meaning there, but I had no clue. These were fascinating structures, the ideograms. The Chinese, the Japanese call them kanji, the Chinese call them hanzi. They're Chinese characters. So I went to the local public library. I was a reader as a kid, and I haunted the local public library. And there at my little branch library in Toledo was the Asian religions shelf. 3 books, 3 books. One of them was Khalil Gibran's The Prophet. I don't know if people run into The Prophet, but next to, I read that, and next to that was a book by was Seton Hall University Press, or St. John's University Press in New Jersey. And it was bilingual, and it was the Tao Te Ching, the Lao Tzu, one of the founding texts of Taoism, Chinese indigenous religion. And I opened it up, and sure enough, it was bilingual, Chinese English facing. And here was a page of clearly printed Chinese characters. And it said in the English, and I was fascinated to go character to ABCs, Chinese characters, ABCs, across the pages. And it said, the way that you can walk is not the eternal way. The way that you can name is not the eternal way. The name that you can name is not the eternal name. When you 道可道非常道名可名非常名有名天地之始无名万物之母 said when it has a name 有名天地 it is the beginning of heaven and earth. When it is nameless, it is the mother of all things. And I could just feel something fill up inside, and I said, I think I've found my tribe. I think this is where I belong. And I had no connection with Sunday school stories of Jesus. Anything that took me to the Middle East, that took me to sand and dates and sheep and goats, I didn't resonate. It wasn't where I belonged. But as soon as it changed to valleys and rivers and mountains and the cosmos and yin and yang, it was, that's coming from inside. That's me. And so I took the Tao Te Ching to my long-suffering Sunday school teacher, who was the volunteer parent of one of my classmates. You know, his name was Mr. Alley. Poor Mr. Alley. I said, Mr. Alley, tell me, here it says, you know, the the Tao is like the eternal feminine. Its use is unending, and it comes from what is not there. It comes from the absence. That's the power of it. Could you explain that? And he said, you can't ask that question here. And I was like, oh, I've got to go somewhere where I can ask this question, because I've got to know. You know, the poor man, he was like, I laid that on him. So what a blessing. The pastor of the Methodist, Epworth Methodist Church in Toledo was a man named Paul Trope, wonderful man. And he said, son, he said, I don't think we're going to be able to keep you here. Please go on with my blessings and let us know what you find, he said. So I did. I went back to the library and put that volume down. I picked up the next one. That's the third book on the Asian religion show. And it was the Six Patriarchs Dharma Jewel Platform Sutra. St. John's University Press, Chinese English facing. And I picked it up and looked at the Chinese and looked at the English. And I felt as if I had been talking to the Sixth Patriarch on the phone that morning. It was that close. It was so familiar. It felt like it was coming from inside my heart. And I said, I need to know what this is about. So how amazing is the public library system in America, that all it took was for me to encounter these texts, for me to suddenly kind of transcend time and space and kind of find my home. I felt immediately related to the wisdom on these 2 pages, whereas years of Sunday school teachings hadn't caught my heart yet. And it wasn't the fault of anyone. It was just, I sense a sense of identity. Anyway, so luckily, amazingly, Toledo, Ohio opened the 3rd high school program for teaching Mandarin Chinese that existed in 1962. There were only 3. And it was because of a man named John Campbell, who had been a Green Beret assigned to Taiwan, fell in love with Chinese culture, came home, retired from the military, and started the Sino-Soviet Study Center in the Toledo Public Schools, located in my high school. So as a junior in high school, I took Mandarin Chinese as an elective. And along with French, I was no good at science and math, but I had an ear for language. So I was taking French and Chinese. And my parents did not say, oh, what a waste of time. You know, what do you think you're doing? That you'll never make a living with that. They didn't. They said, well, that will broaden you. Go ahead and study. So from that moment, as a junior in high school, I studied Chinese consistently every summer. I went to Middlebury College for Middlebury's summer language program, 2 years in Chinese, 1 year in Japanese. I followed Chinese through undergraduate school, then on to UC Berkeley. And you could say I'm still studying it to this day. Mm. So 50 plus years of studying Mandarin, and it opens up, I learn new words every single day. I love Chinese language. And here's another, as I apologize profusely for telling a mystical story, because I don't want people to come to the Dharma out of mysteries, but to deny it is also not accurate. So there are things about the path that I think go beyond knowledge, that go beyond language and thought. So there are some inconceivable aspects to the Dharma for sure. So one of the inconceivable aspects of the Dharma in my life was my connection to the Avatamsaka Sutra. Can't explain it, but I had set up in the Berkeley Hills, being a graduate student and pursuing my MA, and my college roommate, Bhikshu Hung Yo, called me up and said, hey, he said, why don't you get over across the Bay Bridge and come over and meet Master Hua, come over to Gold Mountain. And I said, what's the point of that? I said, you're locked into some Hispanic ghetto. I said, I've been to Japan. I know what Zen is. Zen is scooping up stream water without even a cup and eating pine nuts when you're hungry. And I said, I don't want to live in some, downtown factory, that's what a waste. He said, you're totally attached. Come and meet the abbot. He's explaining the Avatamsaka Sutra. And I said, what's the Avatamsaka Sutra? Not interested. Hung up the phone. I was deeply immersed in my own dukkha at the time, my attachments. So a year later, I'd been eating my own cooking. I had been kind of coming to the end of the joys of scholarship, and without motivation. I didn't think I wanted to be a professor. The Vietnam War was going strong, and I didn't want to run to Canada, but I didn't want to go die behind a machine gun, shot out of the air in a helicopter. And that was happening to my friends. So I didn't know what to do. And Bhikshu Hung Yo called again, and he said, come and listen to an Avatamsaka lecture. So he said, by the way, there's a feast today, vegetarian feast, come on over. How's your own cooking going? Okay, I'll see you. How do I get there? So my first introduction to Gold Mountain. So I parked my Volvo outside the door and scrambled, because it was the 15th Street is a tough neighborhood. The projects are directly across the street, and there were gunshots every night. And so anyway, I scuttled across the sidewalk, knocked the door opened, and I stepped inside, and it was cold inside, and I could smell the incense, and the air had a quality of stillness. And I could hear the wooden fish, dong, 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 dong. And I felt this uncanny feeling of all the tension in my body, kind of as if there was a spigot on my toe, and it opened up and all the tension just went out of my body. And a voice inside said, you're back, you're home, go to work. It's like, what? So I went back out on the sidewalk immediately. And here was planes going over. It's so noisy in the mission that you can't hear the airplanes flying overhead. The ambient traffic noise is so loud that, the buses and the cars and the body shop, Smitty's body shop is right next door. So I'm hearing the wheel lug nuts are getting, And so I turned around and went back in the monastery, and this calm descended on my body, and it was as if a knot in my heart opened. I hadn't even known I had a knot tied in my heart, and it opened up. And it was like, the Avatamsaka Sutra, said Master Hua that night, he said, is like a magnet. And we are like iron filings. And he said, we're here because of past vows to protect the sutra. And the sutra draws us in, he said. And I had no clue what that meant. That sounded way too mystical for me. And I was, actively trying to stay away from, a converted mattress factory in the Mission District. I was, and yet being a professor, being a draft dodger, that didn't appeal. So what was I to do? And then 3 years later, I found myself on the highway reciting the name of the Avatamsaka Sutra, Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yen Jing, reciting a repentance verse from the sutra while I bowed, Hua Yen Hai Hui Fo Pusa, standing up again, and doing that probably 1 million times, while holding a vow of silence. And I didn't write letters, didn't read letters, read no books, said no words except the Avatamsaka Sutra, that was the only book we had in the car, except for the Six Patriarch Sutra. And so somehow your question is about language. And if I had to say among the various practices of the Dharma, what is my door, you could say it's exploring the Buddha's words. And Chinese is my tool. I understand a little bit of Japanese and French. I bombed out of Sanskrit at Cal. I don't do inflected languages. I do tonal languages somehow. So that is, language is what brought me in and what holds me to this day. I've been explaining the Avatamsaka Sutra every week for about 20, almost 30 years now. So my identity in the Dharma comes from language entirely, and Chan, those two things.
Thank you. That was really, it's especially moving for me to hear someone's path into the Dhamma. So thank you so much, Reverend. And I think we'll let you get to bed, and we also have our mornings as well. But you've given us over an hour and a half of your time, and I just want to express how grateful we are, and what a pleasure it's been to spend the time and to hear everything you've said.
I appreciate that, and again, thank you for the opportunity. And if I can dedicate any of these comments and any value that there's, I'd like to dedicate it to the continued brotherhood of the tradition of the Chan, Mahayana Chan school and the Thai forest tradition. I think every bit that we can do to strengthen our fellowship and our walk along the path will help the Dharma survive in the times to come. We don't know what's ahead in terms of biodiversity being lost in front of our eyes, and whether there will be forests for Thai forest monks in the future. Forests may burn. Here in Australia, we're doing La Nina, but 2 years ago it was bushfires. So I think our fellowship and our continued mutual support is a bright light for the continuity of the Dharma into the future. So I'd like to dedicate any goodness that comes from tonight to that goal.
Likewise, and just to say that I think the fact that we have a forest at Abayagiri where Ajahn Kovilo ordained and I've spent time is due to your teacher, Master Hua, granting us that land, and just the beauty of that relationship going from all those years ago. So in many ways, as that got both of us started on this monastic path, it was due to that. So
notice in my background, my virtual background, there's a forest. This is the bush outside, and there's a kookaburra. I don't know if you can see him. You've got a kookaburra up here in the bush. So I'm, yeah, I know. And there's the shadow of the greats. If it wasn't for Master Hua's blessings, I don't know if yeah. But those vows run deep, and he and Ajahn Sumedho have had those connections apparently from lives past, so they say. So let's hope that the ties that we make now will make a new raft of stories for people in the future. So.
Sadhu.
All right. Thanks again, both of you. Do you have any ceremony to close? Do you do any transference? Could I?
Yes, please, Dharma Master, please.
All right. So invite anyone who sees this to please send out any joy in the Dharma that you may have gotten from and in the series. I know I'm one of many bhikkhus who have been interviewed, and so please support this series, and let's expand the measure of our minds and let the goodness bring some light to the world. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise.